bookshop. It's the bookshop. It's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. It is Sam Fightful, your host of your favorite little podcast about reading, writing, literature, being in New York, and waking up at 4 a.m, John Updike's Ghost. And I am joined, as always, by the co-owner of the Bookshop of Beverly Farms and global traveler, Miss Hannah Harlow. How are you doing, Hannah?
I'm so good. I am here in New York City on a little quick impromptu vacation. Yeah, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. How about you?
Vacation,
How are you?
New York City, city of letters, very literary place. Half the books ever written are probably about New York City, if I were to guess.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, good location for you. I'm a little bit punchy because my wife flew to Atlanta this morning and I had to drop her off at 4:15 in the morning.
Yikes.
So not feeling 100% awake. And plus, my sister has rejiggered our recording schedule yet again. And so I'm just all off. It's early. I'm drinking coffee. I had to take on at least 10 milligrams to get my head right. So
yeah, I apologize. It's a weird week. Yesterday was Marathon Monday. The store was closed and my kids are on vacation, which is why we're here in New York doing nothing literary.
No
one wants to go to the Morgan Library with me to see the Beatrix Potter exhibit.
What?
I know.
Let's go. That sounds awesome, actually. You should have taken me on your vacation.
Maybe next time.
I have work to do. I can't just be vacationing like some people. I got to be on the grindstone. Let's get to our agenda for today. I have 3 books. I'm going to be finishing up my discussion of Leigh Bardugo's The Familiar. I have a weird book that I picked off the ARC pile called The Band by a woman named Christine Ma Kellums. And then, as a special treat, I, in honor of John le Carré, recently deceased, I have decided to read Call for the Dead, a nice little slim volume of his that I found on my shelf and didn't realize why it was there. So I picked it up and I'm reading it. What about you?
I have 2 books to talk about. The first is The Secret Commonwealth by Philip Pullman.
Oh, among my favorites. I love that. I just reread it, actually.
Oh, good. And then I read a book called I Cheerfully Refuse by Leif Enger.
I like the title. Sounds good to me. Okay, before we get to that agenda, we want to remind everybody that next weekend, the weekend of April 27th and 28th, with a little opening reception on 26th, is the Newburyport Literary Festival.
Very exciting.
Which we actually are sponsoring. We are one of the 3 booksellers. I particularly like it when they point people to the websites of other booksellers as they are promoting our appearances there. That always makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I really like it. But we are also speaking at this event. You should come see me speak with Keith O'Brien and Chad Finn about baseball books on Saturday at 3:00 in the Old South Church in Newburyport. Hannah is going to be, looks like, moderating a Zoom discussion about YA mysteries on Sunday. And
that's true.
And
late breaking news.
And you will be able to watch it live in person, but not in person, on Zoom recording of John Updike's Ghost on Sunday at 3:00, I think.
3:30, I believe.
3:30. You can find a link on the Newburyport schedule website.
You got to register on the Zoom. You'll get the little link to join.
Clickety click. And then you'll be there. We'll be with Jamie Attenberg and Steve Allman, 2 fantastic, well-published writers who have new books about literary craft, writing craft out there in the marketplace. But we're just going to be talking with them about what we're reading, which is what we do here on John Updike's Ghost. And since I have 3 books, why don't I start with the Leigh Bardugo, since that's where we finished last episode. I think that you are wrong in your inclination that it's a bad book that you don't like. I think you would enjoy it if you gave it a chance.
I didn't say it was a bad book.
I know you didn't say it. That was hyperbole on my part. But this is actually, I think it's the best thing I've read since like Six of Crows. I think it's
of hers or just best.
No, of hers. Like, like I said, I thought the Ninth House and the Yale demon stuff was kind of boring, and the Wonder Woman book is what it is. But so some very interesting things that popped up in this. So first of all, I really like the storytelling a lot. So it's polyphonic, but we don't it's not one of those deals where you get the name at the title of the chapter to let you know who's, vision that we're going to be looking out of. But it does shift around, and we have some interesting.
I see. I didn't get that far.
Yeah. So it does shift around, and you get some different perspectives. But, what I like about it is it kind of slips around a little bit. And you get this sort of semi-omniscient narration in the end, but you see things from different angles. And the storytelling is interesting in that it's called The Familiar, and the familiar is like one of the main characters, but in sort of an homage to the idea of the familiar, where like you are sort of tethered to the person that you are the familiar of, he's always a side character, right? So he's always he's driving the action, but we always kind of see it from somebody else's perspective, right? So
what is a familiar?
The familiar is like standard magic, where like they are someone, for a witch, their familiar might be a cat, right? They're like, it's a sort of being that is tied to you and like does your bidding or whatever.
Does your bidding. Okay. Right? Yes.
Not necessarily in a menacing way. Like a lot of times you're familiar, like a witch and a cat are like buddies, and like usually animals. But there's a good sort of magical universe. It's all tied to sort of basic mysticism, and the kind of metaphor is that the Spanish Inquisition is like Christianity trying to stamp out the magic in the world, so kind of like Jewishness, Muslim, inclinations, anything that's sort of outside the Christian ethos has like a magical tint to it. And so the
girl the book opens with, who has some magical abilities, she becomes somebody's familiar?
No.
Or no. Okay.
So she the conceit is that this like not low level, like a dude that used to be the king's secretary who has fallen out of grace is trying to get back into the king's grace by bringing him like a magical person to help him in his various wars against like Austria and wherever the hell, right?
Yes.
And so he's been burned because this woman who sees visions saw that his armada would get trounced, and then his armada did get trounced. So he's like thinking that anybody who's magic is from the devil. So this contest is held by this former secretary to have the best magician, not really a magician, but person who can do
magical person,
perform a miracle that is pure and will pass the scrutiny of the Inquisition. Right? So you got to do your miracle in like a godly way. And so this dude who has a familiar and is therefore like so his familiar grants him like incredible luck, right? So this dude has risen up through the ranks because generation after generation has had this familiar available to them, and everything they try goes well. And so he's angling for like a dukeship or something, and is trying to is gathering up magic people to win this contest. And he's got his familiar to train the scullery maid that we open. So the familiar is training the scullery maid, right? And so, you kind of see it coming, but it sort of doesn't make sense that the scullery maid and the familiar end up being like long lost lovers.
Okay.
Right? So
Yes.
She is like a scullery maid who has risen up through poverty and has like been gifted all of these riches because she can do this crazy magic with like this Jewish singing or whatever.
Right. Well, and so I like the premise that she is in this contest to perform these like, godly in a Christian way miracles when she's
doing it
Jewish.
with Jewish language.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So,
that's very great. That's great.
right. So like, that's really cool. She's like kind of like trying to navigate this, and he's trying to like help her because he's been this familiar. He's like unkillable for, many generations. He knows some magic. So he's trying to be like, okay, here, this is the way to do the magic without triggering all the bad stuff or whatever.
And they fall in love.
But so then they fall in love, right?
Okay.
And they don't just fall in love. They fall in love in what Leigh Bardugo has apparently been wanting to write her whole career, in like serious, like Anais Nin style, like sex scene or two, right? So you're reading along. And so this guy the familiar starts out as like this desiccated, old, gross guy.
Ew.
But her power reinvigorates him into the prince that he once was. And so therefore, banging can occur. He like teaches her how to bang, and you're like, okay, I guess this is not where I thought this was going. But it actually kind of holds together.
It works for you, apparently.
As I said last time, she uses these sex scenes to advance the plot, right?
Good. Phew,
right?
See? Yes.
Right?
Thank
so,
you, Leigh.
He behaves in certain ways during the sex scenes that, deepens their relationship. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I thought it was very well executed. But if you did not see that coming, like me, you might be like, oh, I guess this is what we're doing now, right? Like, it goes beyond the standard like romance scene in a romance book. The more, I would say one of the most explicit, I was like, oh, okay, we're going to go to this kind of detail. Okay, here we go.
Okay, interesting. Well, that point, though, that each scene is advancing the plot, I would like to latch on to for 1 minute.
Go for it.
I did just start reading Steve Almond's new craft book.
Oh.
So that, I could prepare for our live recording in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called Truth is the Arrow, Mercy is the Bow.
Yeah, I'm not sure this was on the agenda.
It wasn't on the agenda.
Okay. Woo! Oh, my goodness.
Because I've only read like a chapter.
Gotcha.
But I've read a couple chapters. One of the first chapters is about plot and how each scene needs to do some work to advance the plot.
Yes.
And that you do read books that have extraneous scenes. But having just finished The Secret Commonwealth, that's what I love about Philip Pullman is like the book is scenes. Like you're moving along. The plot is moving along.
He's always propelling you. And there's like there's a breakneck pace and urgency to it, even when you are in quiet scenes. Like he is the best at that. He's
the best, period. So did you have more to say about Leigh Bardugo? Or
I think that pretty much sums it up. Yeah, I think we can transition into the Secret Commonwealth.
Well, I know
it has an amazing magic system.
I mean, I really was so happy to be back in this world. So after I read Stormfront by Jim Butcher, which, again, it's not a bad book, but I did need maybe let's say a palate cleanser, or I needed like something that was a little more wholesome. I don't know. Yeah. So I was
Secret Commonwealth actually is not as wholesome as you might think.
It's not as wholesome as some of his previous books in this world.
Right. Especially there was the last third is like, holy smokes.
Yeah. I mean, there's like an F-bomb that comes out in the last third and then maybe one or two more, which was like, whoa, dude. Well, I thought we had an understanding, but like it's actually very effective, right?
Well, I mean, he gets into the serious depravity of man, That's what we got to explore here in the final third.
Right. So I was staring at my shelves and there were all my, his dark material books lined up, and the book that comes before The Secret Commonwealth, the Book of Dust, I had read. I read all these like a little belatedly.
I think the Book of Dust is the whole series. The first book is La Belle Sauvage.
That's when Lyra's young, pre-Lyra. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I read that a little while ago. I actually kind of wish I'd read that much more recently when I read The Secret Commonwealth, because they do start to reference a bunch of stuff from that book, which was like a kind of a hazy memory for me. Mm-hmm. But, I persevered and figured it all out. because I'm a clever person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the Secret Commonwealth is so good. Like, he's so good at his character development. So you love every character and how clever they are, and things get revealed that you didn't see coming. The propulsiveness we talked about. And then there's so much of the book is about this kind of rift between Lyra and her demon Pan, which is like intensely sad. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's this beautiful metaphor for like the anxiety and depression that, kids are experiencing today, right? Like they have a uncomfortable relationship with themselves, which
Right.
I think is just, the way that the demon sort of artifice kind of helps him explore who are we and what is my soul and what is me and am I my decisions? Like all that stuff is genius. It's actually, if you've had cognitive behavioral therapy, you can see that he's exploring like a lot of those ideas.
Yeah. So there's two authors inside the book that get introduced that are questioning, like, maybe demons aren't real. Like nothing is real, right? Like your demons aren't real. And so Lyra goes through this moment of like, maybe Pan is like, I can see Pan, right? But maybe Pan's not real. Maybe this is all being made up. And like, it's just kind of an amazing moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's the indictment of like logic as the driving force of humanity, right? It's actually a great indictment of neoliberalism. This idea that if we just all follow the rules, if we just create rules and we all follow them, then everybody will be happy and society will work beautifully. And then you're like, oh, whoops, we just created fascism and totalitarianism. Uh-oh.
Yes.
And like, it's just, and I think people felt a little betrayed by the last third of Secret Commonwealth because, they were used to a sort of YA environment that was a little more warm, cozy.
I can see that.
But when you think of the central conceit of his Dark Materials, where we're literally severing souls from children and leaving them like as desiccated husks, that's pretty violent.
Yeah.
And then I think the sexual assault scene in Secret Commonwealth is maybe the best done I have ever sort of witnessed. Like it just transmits the terror and the like visceral nature of it. So like it is so hard to read.
It is so hard to read. And just
especially because you love Lyra so much, you're just so angry.
And she's fighting so hard. And I think sometimes not everyone conveys like how hard you're fighting and just how futile it is.
Exactly.
And, like, how that feels. I think my one criticism is that Philip, it's been 5 years since this book came out.
Where is
ends
the third
on a big
book of
cliffhanger.
Dust?
Like,
I know.
Where's my last book?
I know. I'm surprised it isn't out yet, but it's got to be coming soon.
It's got to be coming.
Yeah. Well, you would know. You're the one that does all the ordering. It's not.
I have not heard
on
about
the long
it
list
yet.
or anything.
No. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, people should read that. It's a good segue into the band.
Is it?
That the band really doesn't have any plot whatsoever.
Yes.
It is the polar opposite. I mean, there is a little bit of a plot, but it is so hard to continue with it. It's a real. So I read the whole thing, and I actually am not 100% sure yet what I think about it because it took me a little while to acknowledge what she was trying to do. So she is a Harvard-trained cultural psychologist, this woman, Christine Ma Kellums. She is first-generation American. I think she's Chinese based on the first person of the book, but I have not gone and explored this woman's heritage, right? Mm-hmm. Because so what the book is about is the band in question, which is one of the like K-pop boy groups, right? BTS or whatever, envision them. And the opening of this is the manager who built this 3-girl group from Korea that was like this, K-pop leading edge, but they fell apart. The band is his second effort. They blew up, are hugely popular, but one of the band members, Duri, has recorded a solo single that offends everybody in Korea because it's about his Japanese father. And I don't know, it gets into like some Asian politics that I sort of generally know, but basically the Japanese were very bad to the Koreans, and Koreans and Japanese are both racist in their own way. And then we also get into the whole American racism with Asians, blah 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 blah. So Duri, right, decides to bail on the K-pop band and finds himself in an H Mart, which I guess are like Korean grocery stores in California. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're all over.
Maybe they're all over. Apparently that they're apparently places where Koreans in America go to get like their.
Yes. There's been a best-selling memoir called Crying in H Mart.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So H Mart, I actually just now put together that that's what Crying in H Mart was referencing.
There you go.
I actually had no idea what H Mart was. Now I know. So that just clicked. There we go. That was great. And so anyway, in this H Mart where he has absconded to, leaving the band, he meets an avatar for Christine Ma Kellums. And then the rest of the book is about a psychology professor who hangs out with a fleeing member of a K-pop group. And there are many references to psychological studies in this. Like, it often reads like, I'm being educated about basic social science. There are like literally references to papers. I don't know if the papers are real, but I'm assuming they are. And so it becomes a very obvious, so the I is the writer, but it reads so much like her that you're like, okay, did this happen? It actually didn't happen to her. I just don't, it's like, it's auto fiction, but it's kind
like so meta that
it's at some point I'm like, well, I don't even know what the story is, and because the story part of the story is so clumsy and dumb, right? It's like this, the woman from the K-pop band ends up trying to blow up the members of the band at the Grammys, and I don't know. I think maybe it's supposed to be a mystery as to what happened, but it's all written in this really heavily stylized passive voice with lots of, I don't know, there's all these asides about how awful, everything is awful all the time, it just, emphasizing how terribly, corporate everything is. And, just all these asides, it's, every liberal complaint that's, ever been made packed into this commentary from this first person that is, I guess, a psychologist. But then there's this whole weird layer where so this dude, the K-pop boy, is staying at their house and her husband and kids are there. And there's all this stuff about their sexual relationship and how he likes to be cuckolded. And so he doesn't mind that she maybe is or isn't, as sort of alluded to, banging this K-pop guy, but she definitely cheated on him in the past and he doesn't care. There's all sorts of weird conversations with them about how he loves her anyway. And so it's this also really kind of weird, tight marital drama at the same,
it sounds, I'm confused about what this book is.
What is this book?
Who is it for, too?
I have no
who's
idea
reading this?
I don't know how it got published. It's so random. It reads like this woman who is a psychology professor was I could write a book. It just did. And, it doesn't take the form of any book I've read before. So,
Wow.
I was like,
really interesting.
Yeah, it's good effort. Because it's
good effort.
Usually, if you read a story about I'm trying to think, I read that romance. What was the LGBT romance I read?
The Case and Calendar?
Yes. Right. And so that was kind of cool because it had some good insidery stuff about what it's like to work in Hollywood. Right. So, hey, these two leads in this movie are being forced to be in a relationship because it's a PR thing. And even though it's a little clumsy, it's like, this is the back office machinations of Hollywood. Haha. Right. But this, like, it's like what a psychology professor who knows nothing about the music industry postulates maybe happens in the back of like K-pop making. Like, you know, it doesn't, it's like, and then they just, there were lots of training and they had to start when they were little. And, it's like, okay, but it's like the very
Is it like
scrim of surface
farcical?
level.
Like, oh, okay.
No, I don't think so. It like takes really seriously, the triumph of, Korean culture that it is for this K-pop to go mainstream. And can you believe it's among the most strange books I've ever read. So that's all I'm going to say about it.
Okay, great.
Very, very weird.
So interesting. I'm going to pick up on one of your notes, which was that everything was terrible. And, because I feel like I do read these books where I'm like, oh, just, like the writing's great and I like the characters and blah, 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 except like everyone's complaining about, like, it just feels so like, yeah, everything's awful and we're just complaining. And it gets to be not fun to read, right? So I've been reading a few of those and kind of putting those down. And I will say that I Cheerfully Refuse by Leif Anger is not that.
Oh, she's cheerfully refusing.
I loved this book. Leif Anger is a writer from Minnesota. His debut novel came out I think I read it maybe 22 years ago, and it was called Peace Like a River. It was like a massive bestseller.
Mm-hmm. Peace Like a River.
I think he's written some other books since then that I have not read. But this book just came out maybe last month. And it's set in the near future. And the near future is like kind of a grim place, but there are these pockets. Everything's been kind of disconnected, right? Like a lot of the infrastructures have failed, right? So there are cell phones, but like people aren't really on them all the time. Like people aren't really like on the internet. Like everyone's kind of living in their little isolated communities. And some of those communities are like scary places.
Yeah, sketch place, yeah.
But he and his wife, when the book opens, are living in this like little town where people are getting by. Like people don't have a lot, right? But they've got their local bakery where they get their bread every day. And his wife has a bookstore, and like it's kind of like new books.
It's a bookstore book.
Well, it isn't really though. It's like a small part of the book, but the wife mostly just goes around like looking, like buying up, like auction wise old books, right? It doesn't seem like there are new books coming out,
right.
But you can get her hands on like people's collections, and then she sells them in her store. And so the book opens with they welcome this kind of younger man into their home because they have an extra room upstairs. So he's going to lodge with them for a little while. And he has brought with him this kind of lost, fabled manuscript called I Cheerfully Refuse by this author that the wife loves. It's her favorite author. And apparently she'd written this book called I Cheerfully Refuse, but it never ended up getting published. But there were advanced copies that had been made that were out in the world. And so this guy brings one with him. That's kind of like this, the book kind of comes with you through the story.
Do we get excerpts from the book? Is it a book within a book?
He does read. There are some, they're short and small. But it's more of like that title, I Cheerfully Refuse, as the book goes on. And like, so bad things happen. This guy ends up on the run from the authorities in a sailboat on Lake Superior, where there are a lot of storms, like microbursts in this near future are like a common thing where they just come through and are very destructive.
A little bit of a climate disaster book.
Yeah. So he's on the run from the authorities. He's kind of looking for his wife. Along the way, he picks up a 9-year-old semi-orphaned child who has a bad, guardian. Yeah. And so he starts reading this I Cheerfully Refuse book to her as they're on the sailboat. And then in the end, there's like, it turns into like a protest book. So like this I Cheerfully Refuse is him like fighting the authorities, like fighting the powers that be, ultimately with other people. And there's like looking for this like happiness in his life that he's experienced, and he knows it's out there and he's going to find it again. And that happiness is just like living a quiet life, right? And like having the simple things and having good people around you, and like, you know.
Well, that's, in seriousness, that's a huge problem in like the organizing left. And people do talk about it. They're always like, oh, you got to make sure to find joy in the world too, There's a lot of people that can't get out of their way just focusing on how awful shit is, right? And like,
right.
I get it. We've talked about it. It can be bad when you're on social media and you're like, oh, dead children in Gaza. Oh, the horrible things happening in Palestine, Ohio. Oh, look at this disaster. Oh, look at that disaster. Oh,
Trump trial.
Totally fucked. Oh, the ocean's warmer than it's ever been. Oh, but like we've said, you being sad about it doesn't help fix it.
Right. So I like this book for being, it's like you have your wry moments, but you also have this just like these moments of joy and beauty. And Leif Enger as an author delivers these lines that just kind of like punch you right in the chest, where you're like, oh, that was beautifully said. Like he has those observations that we kind of look to authors to make for us, right?
Yeah. 100%.
So I really
energizing.
Yeah.
Well, I like that. I am really enjoying my John Le Carré. This one's called Call for the Dead. I actually don't know enough about his work to know if this George Smiley is a recurring character or not.
I don't know either. I have not read a ton of his work.
But it's from 1961, published by Walker and Company in the United States in 1962. And this is the classic stuff that I think, it's early Cold War, right? So 61, really, we've just been dealing with the Russians and the Soviet Union for a little while. And like what's great about it is very classic, like spy novel in that, kind of all the characters ahead of time. It's the British Secret Service. They're worried about communists infiltrating the UK. And they interview this kind of low-level ministry employee at the secret, the Parliament's office or whatever. I don't know. Because someone accused him of being a communist, and even though George Smiley, the guy who interviewed him, would have cleared him, the dude has killed himself because he says, he can't live under this cloud of suspicion. And, this seems sketchy. I don't think he really killed himself. And then off they go, Yeah. But what I love about it, is how they went about information transmission back in the 60s is amazing. It's like they call the operator exchange and, have you gotten a call from so-and-so earlier today? Well, let me ask the girls. And then one of the girls, I did have a conversation with somebody on the telephone, and just like how everything takes forever. Like they have to go drive somewhere to deliver this piece of information. And he wrote down on a piece of paper and mailed it. And 3 days later, this revelation happened. And everything's just so like, I know it's nostalgia or whatever for the pre-internet age, but everything is so like precise and literary, and people take time to make literary references, and like there are bon mots and little asides, and everything just is so sort of self-contained and is not like exploding all over the place with information and texts and all. It's just so quiet. And I think in later years, he went like a little bit more kind of racy necessarily, but like more 80s or whatever, like more big and fast paced or whatever. But here in the 60s, everything is just so, lots of talk about their clothes and how the rain hit us had, and, just the scenery and the street and, how London is failing. And I don't know, just it's a great change of pace from like contemporary literature. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, that sounds so nice. And, I just wonder if we're going to get even more historical fiction as we move along, because I do think authors are like, I don't want to have to deal with cell phones. I don't have to deal with the internet. So I'm going to set my book in like 1975.
Yeah, I think that's happening all the time, but we have to figure out a way not to do that.
Right.
There's got to be a way to write good stories about like the way the world works.
And obviously there are people doing it. I'm sure there always will be.
I guess, but I feel like people are struggling. The band, that it's very contemporary. It's very the way that we live our lives now. One of the like central conceits is that he's constantly talking into his Samsung phone, and the phone is translating what he's saying into English to have the conversation with her. And then it kind of comes out he's known English all along. And, it's like this kind of interesting way that he's using technology to fuck with her. And I don't know.
I read all these descriptions of books that are about, it's like, this person was an influencer. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to read that book.
Well,
this person was a podcaster. And I'm like, you know what? I've read enough books about podcasters. Like, I'm getting sick of them because I don't know. Like, I just feel like there are a lot of books about some of these contemporary, professions or whatever. And I'm sure they really get into, I don't know, some of the details of that. But
I know. And it's sort of, it's like, as though someone had written a serious book about the people who made He Who Dies with the Most Toys Wins t-shirts in 1987 or something. It's like that cultural moment is so ephemeral, and like, hopefully it dies. Influencer culture. Like, I was reading this thing in the Times yesterday about Instagram is paying some influencers to allow them to run their accounts with AI chatbots. And so they like ingest everything that influencer has ever said and then use it to train an AI chatbot. And so then you can go and text your favorite influencer and they DM you back, even though it's not them. It's a
in their
chatbot.
voice.
It's in their voice. And so people can feel like they're interacting with their profiles, like, what is that for? Disgusting, like, what
gross.
Okay, so teenagers can think they're having parasocial relationships with like fucking computers. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on with that. But so, the nostalgia for the pre-internet is deep.
It's real.
And if you want some more of it, read some John.
But that's like, Lee Fenger was like, I'm going to write about the future and I'm going to pretend none of this stuff exists anymore. Yeah.
I've said it before, but like, that's why so many of these dystopian futures are really wish fulfillment. It's like, I wish the zombies would just come so I wouldn't have to go to work.
Yeah.
So crazy. Like, and it's just like COVID, really. But, people are more scared of being poor in America than they are of dying. It's just really bad.
It's grim. It's a grim situation. Anyway, on that note,
there's good books to read anyway. You should come and buy them from your local bookstore.
Yes.
Which is still fully analog. We don't even use the internet at the bookshop of Beverly Farms. You just walk in and we throw a book at you.
On that note, visit NewburyportLiteraryFestival.org for more information about the festival events we told you about.
And come on the 27th to the bookstore where it is Independent Bookshop Day, and you can buy something from us and then spin a little wheel that Hannah has purchased that will grant you prizes of some kind.
I'm so excited about the Wheel of Fun.
What is a prize that I might get?
You could win a corduroy bookshop hat that are super cool.
Those are super cool.
You could
and
win
expensive. I hope there's not very many wedges.
There'll just be one wedge for that. You could get like 10 or 20% off your
sweet
purchases.
Yeah.
There's going to be a freebie box There's all sorts of stuff in there.
Oh, I bet.
So that one of the spokes will be like pick from the freebie box.
In the freebie box. There were some good stickers and pins from Ministry of Time in the back. You should put those in the freebie box.
Yes. We need to talk about Ministry of Time. Maybe it's a May book.
It comes out in May, yeah.
Yeah.
After the fest is over, we can focus our attention on Ministry of Time.
Yes. The festival is taking up a lot of my headspace.
That's too bad. It's taking up zero of my headspace. I'm just going to show up, talk about baseball. All right. Well, on that note, do you have any other items of interest?
No. People should review. Give us the stars, all the stars on the platforms of your viewing choice.
Be
Subscribe.
like Rick Johansson and comment.
Comment. We'd love to hear from you.
On
YouTube,
don't know what to
Spotify.
say. So if you're wondering what to say, just say something like, wow, this podcast is like one of the best out there. It's so awesome.
This is my favorite podcast. You could email us at info@realbookshop.com.
Yeah.
If you want
give
to
us
say
your
hi.
thoughts.
Give
Tell
us
us
your
what
thoughts.
books you want us to read and chat about. All right. Well, on that note, we will say see you in Newburyport, if not before then.
Newburyport or in the store for Independent Bookstore Day. We'd love to see you there too.
Bye.
Bye.